Ladies and gentlemen, this is MTG Traders. My name is Taryn. Let's go over April 11th Amonkhet preview season. There are a ton of cards that have been spoiled today, so I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as I can. So first, let's go over some Aftermath cards. We've got Heaven to Earth. Heaven is X mana and 1 green for an instant. Heaven deals X damage to each creature with flying, and its Aftermath is Earth for X and 2 red mana for a sorcery. Earth deals X damage to each creature without flying. What a great but somewhat expensive board wipe. In Limited, this will surely see some play, as flyers are probably the biggest issue in Limited format. However, in Standard, because it's a semi-board wipe, I don't think it'll see any play. But the Aftermath cost of Earth is pretty reasonable, so it might be in some weird Delirium shell or something like that. I wouldn't put it past it. But I do think if you pull this in sealed or if you get it passed in draft, very pickable. Next up, one more Aftermath card. We've got Reduce to Rebel. Reduce is 2 colorless and 1 blue mana for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller plays 3 colorless mana. And its Aftermath is Rebel, which is 2 colorless and 1 red mana for a sorcery. Up to 3 target lands don't untap during their controller's next untap step. What a fantastic limited and sealed counter ability, as well as Tempo Stopper. This is a somewhat okay counter spell in Standard. I think the 3 mana for counter 3 is okay, especially because you have the Aftermath as well. But I mean, just for 3 mana, you could also just disallow, or Void Shatter, or any number of 3 mana counter spells. I do think if you're going to be putting this card in your main deck, you're definitely looking to use both of the abilities. But again, I don't know if this will actually see any kind of Standard competitive play. I do think in Sealed and in Limited, it's great though. But alright, let's move on to some rare cards real quick. We've got Dread Wanderer for 1 black mana, and it's a 2/1 Jackal Zombie. Zombie Jackal, sorry about that. Dread Wanderer enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay 2 colorless and 1 black mana. Return Dread Wanderer from the graveyard to the battlefield. Activate this only anytime you can cast a sorcery, and only if you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. I'm not sure why this is rare. Now before you go in the comments and say, well, it's because of graveyard recursion, I understand that part, and that is why it's rare. But the 2 criteria you have to meet for this card, which is pay mana and have less cards in your hand, doesn't seem that great. I do think this may be in some black-red Rakdos shell in Standard or Limited and Sealed, so it'll probably see play there. It's just the Standard format that bothers me a little bit, especially because it comes in tapped. But being so cheap for 1 black mana does have its upsides. Gravecrawler this is not, but that doesn't mean it's terrible. I'm just not really aware of a shell yet for this card that would work. But moving on to another black card, we've got Plague Belcher. 2 colorless and 1 black mana for a 5/4 zombie beast. It has Menace, and when it enters the battlefield, you put in 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control. Whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. This card is really interesting, and it makes me think that a tribal zombie deck will actually be in the format in Standard. This is an amazing Commander card if you're playing zombies in Commander. And 3 mana for a 5/4 in black with Menace is ridiculous. So kind of an idea of a play here, you pay 3 mana, play this guy, kill one of your 2/2 zombies, your opponent loses 1 life, and you have a 5/4 with Menace on the board. That seems pretty good. And speaking of zombies, let's talk Lord of the Accursed. 2 colorless and 1 black mana for a 2/3 zombie. Other zombies you control get +1/+1. Pay 1 colorless and 1 black mana and tap it. All zombies gain Menace until end of turn. What an amazing zombie lord. In Sealed and in Draft, if you can build around a zombie deck, this guy's the card you want to see in Uncommon. In Standard, this pretty much solidifies that a zombies tribal deck will be in Standard. Will it be good? Who knows? But there are a lot of zombies now thanks to Innistrad and this set. But this is also another great zombie lord for the Commander players out there, especially when it has such a great win condition as well. Menace is a real, well, menace. But moving on to another black card, which is basically the Mad Bent staple card, we've got Grimm Strider, a 3 colorless, 1 black mana, 6/6 horror. Grimm Strider gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand. So let's just put this on the top here with all the other Hellbent cards. And no, there's going to be a Red Black Madness deck that's going to be nice. In Limited and in Draft though, this card is pretty good. It really depends of course on how many cards you have in hand. However, in the mid game in Limited and in Draft, you're usually top decking. So playing a 4 mana 6/6 in black is pretty good. Alright, one more black card. We've got Stir the Sands for 4 colorless and 2 black mana for a sorcery. Create 3 2/2 zombie creature tokens. It also has cycling for 3 colorless and 1 black mana. This is basically a win condition in Limited and Sealed, and I don't think this will probably see Standard play, but being able to play 3 2/2s is pretty good, especially for 6 mana, and it also has cycling for 4. Again, I don't think the playability is high in Standard, but it is there for the potential. But yeah, and in Sealed and in Draft, if you play this, it's basically the win condition. Being able to play 2 3/3s is usually just too much for a board state to handle, unless it's already been gummed up with a bunch of other creatures in a creature-based strategy. And so if that's the case, you can definitely just cycle this away away for 4 and get a new card. Cycling gives a lot of good cards even more utility, and that's what this card is doing. But moving on, we've got Doomed Dissenter. See what it did there? For 1 colorless and 1 black mana for a 1/1 human. When Doomed Dissenter dies, create a 2/2 zombie creature token. Doomed Traveler, this is sadly not. However, it's still pretty good in limited and sealed. Trading up for a 1/1 to a 2/2 is always great. I don't think this will see any zombie tribal work in standard, but I do think in limited and in sealed it's a good blocker, and then it turns into a pretty good attacker, especially in the early game. But being a common, this actually does quite a bit. I would be happy to pick this for my 10th, 11th, or 12th pick in draft, for sure. But let's go on to some blue spells. We've got Cryptic Serpent, a 5 colorless and 2 blue mana for a 6/5 Serpent. Cryptic Serpent costs 1 less colorless mana for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. This card is really good. I definitely think this will probably see some standard brew play. I'm not necessarily sure if it will see like Pro Tour standard play, but being able to play a 6/5 for just 2 mana in the late game is ridiculous. However, drawing into this in the mid game and early game is terrible. So we'll just have to see how many are going to be in a deck. I'm thinking maybe probably a 1 or 2 of. In drafted and sealed though, this card is great, as those matches do tend to drag on, and this will probably be a 4 mana 6/5 for you. And in blue, that's a good thing. But moving on to another blue spell, we've got Vizier of the Crumbling Sands. A 2 colorless, 1 blue mana, 1/3 human cleric. It's got tap for untapped target permanent. It also has cycling for 1 colorless and 1 blue mana. And when you cycle this card, you can untap target permanent. What a great limited and even standard card. This will definitely help in the exert strategies in limited and in draft. I'm not so sure about standard, but untapped target permanent does see a lot of standard play in those combo decks. So there may be a combo deck coming from this card. We'll have to see, but I definitely think there is some potential here. And moving on to some green cards, we've got Shafet Monitor, a 5 colorless and 1 green mana 6/5 lizard. It has cycling for 3 colorless and 1 green mana. And when you do cycle this card, you can search your library for a basic land or desert card and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. Desert card? Interesting. Maybe we'll see something later in this video on that. Again, in limited and in draft, a great 6/5. Cycling is always good, and if you pick this up in the early and mid game, you can definitely cycle it away to get some mana. I think this card fixes itself very nicely. I doubt this will see any kind of standard play just based on the power level, but I think in draft and in limited, a fine card. And next up, we've got a green creature that's another Camel. Quarry Hauler is a 3 colorless and 1 green mana 4/3 Camel. When Quarry Hauler enters the battlefield, for each counter on target permanent, put another counter of that kind on it or remove a counter from it. What an interesting common. For 4 mana, this won't see any kind of standard play, but for limited and draft, this will see a lot of play. Especially when you're trying to move around a lot of -1/-1 counters. To put -1 counters on your mana rocks to tap for things, perhaps put a -1 counter on a creature so it, whenever it attacks, you gain life. Things like that. I think there's definitely a lot of potential here. But again, it's too expensive in standard, so probably won't see any play. But it's another Camel. I need like 1 more Camel and I can make like a standard Camel like kitchen table deck. But let's go over one of the red cards that is spoiled today, and it's Deem Worthy. 4 colorless and 1 red mana for an instant. Deem Worthy deals 7 damage to target creature. It has cycling for 3 colorless and 1 red mana. 7 damage? That's interesting. In limited and in draft, it's definitely going to destroy whatever creature you throw it at, and its cycling cost is fairly casted. However, this being an uncommon is strange to me. It just seems so expensive that it would probably just be a common. But that's just my personal opinion. It's probably just because of the cycling on it. Never see standard play, but I do think in limited and in draft it's going to be pretty good. But next up we've got an artifact, Pyramid of the Pantheon for 1 colorless mana. It's got 2 colorless and tap it. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Place a brick counter on Pyramid of the Pantheon. And then it's got another tap ability, add 3 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Pyramid of the Pantheon. In limited and in draft, great card if you need a mana rock, but unless you can survive through the mid and late game, the add 3 mana of any 1 color is kind of a long shot. So all in all, to do that, it would take 7 mana. Now that's not counting if you have things that put additional counters on stuff, like the Camel we talked about earlier, but I do think that kind of interaction is very limiting, so you probably won't see too much play on that. Very interesting card. I'm not sure if you'll see standard play or not. We'll definitely have to see the standard format to kind of see what happens. I do think it's very playable though in limited and in draft. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm really kind of like torn on this card. Next up we have a new land, Scorched Desert. It's a land desert. When Scorched Desert enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player. It taps for colorless mana. Okay. I mean, this will see limited and sealed play. Unless like there's a card that interacts with deserts in a meaningful way, this will never see standard play. Having a one-off ping ability and tapping for colorless mana is not what you want to be doing in standard. And this would be a very low pick for me in draft. I mean, but you never know. There may be a card that interacts with deserts that we're not aware of just yet. I do think this may be like a harbinger of things to come, but this card itself, not good. But speaking of cards that are insanity, let's talk new Planeswalker. Nissa, Steward of Elements. It's X, 1 green, and 1 blue for an X-Loyalty Planeswalker. There are so many things of just that's brand new, it's blowing my mind. But let's go over the loyalty counters now too. Her +2 is Scry 2. Very simple, very effective. This also sets her up for her 0 ability, which is look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card or a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the amount of counters on Nissa, you may put that card onto the battlefield. What? Okay. And then her ultimate, which is her -6, untap up to 2 target lands. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands. Okay, Wizards, you win. You win, you win, you win, you win. You can play Nissa for 3 mana, then take her to 3 loyalty counters on her first turn, which allows you to set up your next 2 draws. You can then cheat out creatures or mana from then on. I don't think her ultimate is that great, but everything else she does is ridiculous. This card is a windmill pick in any format right now. I definitely think this will see some sort of standard play, and I definitely think it'll be a 4-of in some crazy deck. She just does so many things that are so good. The possibilities are literally endless here, guys. She's just so good. Like there have been people who are saying that she doesn't defend herself, but her 0 ability more than happily does that. But that's if she hits a creature with enough loyalty counters to be able to put it out. I understand that. But at the same time, she's a 3 loyalty planeswalker that can actually like do work in the mid and late game. So she's not just a dead card after like turn 8 or something. But what did you guys think? Do you like the new Nissa? What about the new zombie cards? I'm really excited to have a zombie tribal back in standard. Like real zombie tribal, not black-blue zombies from Innistrad. Real zombies. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to MTG Traders for more content in the future. We'll see you guys tomorrow.